Hello. In this video I would like to speak with you about another kind of natural disaster, which are the urban floods. In the previous course, Designing Resilient Architecture Research, one of our teams worked on this specific topic, and these are slides of their presentation. So these are also slides that we are going to share with you on our platform, and you will be able to download them and read the text in detail and learn from what your colleagues have done previously in terms of studying this particular issue. So urban floods is something that affects cities like all over the world, but there are some areas that are particularly affected by it. For example, areas that are near rivers, and you know rivers go up and down quite a lot in the seasons according to how much snow the country has had in the winter, or areas that are affected by floods that are somewhere closer to the sea or the ocean. For example, right now we have Venice, which is affected every year by floods, and with climate change, the floods get bigger and bigger. So like the city is apparently going to be suffering more and more in the next years from it, and that's why it's trying to build the so-called barrier called Moses in front of the city to protect it from the high tides of the Mediterranean. So our team, Urban Floods, has focused on the Netherlands, for example, which is a country that has been able to adapt quite well to floods, because a vast part of its territory, probably half of its territory, is affected by floods. So they've been able to build barriers and to kind of dry some of the land and desalinate it and use it for cultivations. This is some of the examples of other cities that are suffering from flood. So what the Netherlands and other cities do is they create a number of canals that run throughout the city that allow the water to flow through it, and to kind of when there is a high tide, or when the rivers are high, the level of the rivers are high, they basically the water goes in some canals so it can come in and then come out of the city. One of the most devastating floods in Europe recently has been the 1966 flood in Florence, in which a number of priceless works of art were lost, and some of the masterpieces of architecture and art were permanently damaged. So the city took a while to recover from this flood. Areas like the Amsterdam, for example, here you see all the rings of the canals that go around the city. So what the city does is, when there is a flood, it essentially lets the water in and then stores it in some area, or assumes that some area are floodable or can take water. And then when the water retracts, then what they do is they kind of dry it and they push it out. The city has used a number of, for example, playground or soccer fields that are submerged and that can take some water away. And so they flood, and it's normal for them to flood, and then afterwards it can they can remove the water. London, Thames River, it has also been damaging the city in the past year. So what they came up with is this system of movable parts that can open and close when there is a high tide. So essentially you see the section here, and you see how these barriers in fact rotate. These are huge walls that can rotate, and when they move up, they keep the water out. All right, so the water that comes from the ocean rises, and the barriers, they're like arches. They keep it away, and then the city essentially is protected from these high tides. A number of other solutions have been studied. For example, walls that can open and close like this, that are kind of temporary walks along the river, and then when there is a flood, they can just flip open and protect the city. Some examples of areas that use green roofs and kind of surfaces that can absorb water. We can find them anywhere from New York Central Park to Denmark, for example. Here, green roofs that absorb the water, so instead of storing, it just comes down, and then the plants kind of take care of it, and the soil absorbs it, so it mitigates the effect. These are some urban strategies that our team Urban Floods has developed of kind of playgrounds or fields that can be flooded and then later can be taken away. There are a number of other solutions, as for example floating houses that can rise up when there is a flood, and then when the water retracts, it can go down. So you'll find a number of these examples that the team has been able to develop, and I invite you to learn something from them and then to incorporate it in your own work.